If you want to create your own high-quality 3D assets from photographs, this video is for you. I'm going to show you how to create something like this, the plan that you can see here on the screen, and this was created using Adobe 3D Sampler using just photographs. Hey, what's up guys, Pablo Munoz here. Today I'm going to show you how to use Adobe 3D Sampler to simplify the process of photogrammetry to create a 3D object based on photographs. Let's jump straight into it. Alright, so here we are in Adobe 3D Sampler. This is what you should see once you open the software. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is click on this 3D object. Currently it's in beta. Click on this plus and click on New 3D Object. So once you click on the 3D object, this is the window that will appear, and obviously you need to import some data. So let me just switch to a different screen, and the data that you need are just a few photos around the object that you want to capture. So I went around this pot plant and took a few photos. I think in total were around 61 or 60 photos around the object at different angles and close-ups as well, so that I can capture some of the finer texture and some of the details around the soil area and the leaves themselves. So that's pretty much it. Once that's ready, let me show you the window that I mentioned before, where we can just take that data, those photos, and drop them in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of those 61 items actually. I'm just going to drag them in here. You see them, I have them selected. I'm going to drop them in there. And that's pretty much it. I'm just going to wait until 3D Sampler does its thing and it just imports all of these photographs. We can just go ahead and name this group 3D plant. 61 photos, and the dimensions, like I said, they're like, high res 4K, well, 4000 by 2000. So that's pretty good. It recognizes the sensor size and the focal length. So if you have a DSLR camera, it should do the same thing as well. Now, we can just go ahead and click submit, and that's it. There's no a lot of like tweaking that you can do at this time, but that's kind of like what I wanted to show you. It's very, very simple. So one of the things that I found to be the mind-blowing is the fact that you can do automatic masking, and the software is intelligent enough to recognize the object. So if I click on the mask here, I'm just going to go ahead and click on generate, right? And I'm going to click on new batch. And I'm just going to wait until it sort of like process all the images from this batch. And I believe, I could be wrong on this one, but I believe is using a very similar algorithm as what Photoshop uses, which allows you to select specific objects. So while it's doing that, let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to bring in Photoshop here and drop in one of these photographs. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this object selection. So the object selection tool, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, right? So this is kind of like the intelligent tool in Photoshop. As you can see, it's pretty accurate. I think the 3D Sampler is using a very similar technology to do that, and it generated a mask for all of these images. Let's go ahead and click on submit, and we're going to change the precision. So you can just go for low, play around with this. I'm going to go for high precision. I want to get all those details, and the photo ordering, there is no necessarily any order that or it's not a sequence, but I'm just going to go for the default, even though I did it kind of like in a sequence, just walking around the model or the object. So I'm going to click on process, and this is just about waiting. So I'm just going to pause the video here and come back when it's ready. All right, so we're back. It took about two minutes to produce this sort of point cloud, and if I move just with the scroll wheel on my mouse, you kind of see what I did with the camera. So this is kind of like an important thing just to highlight the fact that I went around the object, and each one of these icons is obviously a camera. And yeah, I just took photos at like 3 different levels. So let's say at ground level, this mid level here, and then at the top, and all around the model. And then I just went in with some close-ups like I showed you before. And this is a pretty impressive an accurate representation of the model. So it's just a point cloud at the moment, but it did a pretty good job isolating the rest of the model. Now, another thing that I need to mention at this point is that I took the photos in an overcast day. So basically there was no contrast or harsh shadows, and that also helps to simplify the process a little bit more. So if you want to go around and take some photos, make sure that they are either in the shade or it's a cloudy day. That works a lot better. Now you see there's a few warnings. So 4 images that were not aligned correctly or properly. So these are just these 4 images that you see here, which is not a big deal. It's just like close-ups anyway. I don't really mind. And I don't have to do anything else. Just go to the geometry details and choose what type of geometry you want. So you want to go full, high, medium, draft, and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to go for full because I want a pretty high-res mesh. And that's it. I'm going to click on submit. And then there is another waiting game. All right, and here we are with the final post-processed version of this plan. So I'm just going to hold the Alt key and the left click on my mouse just to rotate around and show you what the result is. I'm going to go closer here. There are some gaps which I kind of like, to be honest, and those are probably because of the the lack of contrast in the photographs as well. But yeah, it's an old pod, so there were actually some holes, I think. And there's a bit of gaps as well here between the leaves, but I can live with that. And if I really wanted to fix that, I can do that in something like ZBrush or any other software to clean the geometry. The same thing here at the bottom. Obviously, I didn't take photos at the bottom, so that's how it looks. But yeah, it's a pretty impressive little tool that takes all the guessing work out of the equation, and you can just like drop some images in here and produce this type of assets. Now, obviously, you can take these further and polish them a little bit, which is a little bit out of the scope of this video. But I just want to show you that this is with the material. This is the solid mesh, so it's a pretty decent, reconstruction of that set of photographs. This is the wireframe, so it's relatively dense here. And then the UV checker. That's just basically how the UVs are arranged, which is not ideal, but it just cut it up into pieces so that you can actually see it in 2D. Anyway, you have a few more options here, and you can bake the normal, bake the ambient occlusion, that sort of thing. I'm just going to leave everything as default. The resolution of the asset, I'm going to set it to 4K. And that's about it, really. I'm going to click on Add to Project, and let's name it 3D Plant. And keep in mind that this plant or this simple pod is actually a very complex object because there are a lot of gaps and things like this nature. So in between this leaf and the pod, there's actually a gap that it sort of found out. I mean, it did a pretty good job. Obviously, there's some little things here to fix, but it's very impressive how from just a couple of clicks, you get something like this. So now we have this in Substance 3D Sampler, and we can go ahead and combine these with a bunch of other filters that you might have tried in the past or that you're familiar with in 3D Sampler, like creating dust or adding a bit of specularity, all that good stuff. I'm just gonna keep it simple and just show you how you can render something like this straight away using 3D Stager. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on the shared button right here, then click on export as. And in here, I'm just going to select this folder where the plan is going to live. So on the left-hand side, you have the mesh settings, which is an FBX, which is great. And the material will be exported as a PNG, like a flat image. That's about it. Let's go ahead and click on export. And then just wait until this bar finishes here. All right, and that finished exporting. Now at this point, if you want, you can just go ahead and click on this icon right here and produce another asset, another 3D object. And now I'm gonna go ahead and fire up Adobe 3D Stager. All right, so here we are inside Substance 3D Stager, and you can create very awesome looking images with this application, and it's very intuitive, very easy to use. So what I'm gonna do is take that FBX that I exported. I had one already for this tutorial that I'm gonna just drop in here, but it's essentially the same thing. And I'm gonna click on import with the default settings, and it imported it. It's a little bit too big. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select the object. So I'm gonna open up the folder here from the scene, select this mesh transform, and then just scroll back a bit so that I can see it. Maybe we can actually select the folder itself so that the pivot is at the bottom. Move that up and then just scale it. Just the usual manipulation of the gizmo, right? You can press F to frame it, and there we go. I don't see exactly how big this is. I just know it is big. So I'm just gonna drop a object, any object really, to compare it. So if you go to the left-hand side and you click on this square or this cube, it will show you all the available 3D objects. So I'm gonna go ahead and find something interesting like this stool, for example, and then just drop it in here. And you can see it's relatively big compared to the stool. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this, scale it down again, and now I can just go ahead and place this. All right. So there's nothing fancy here, just moving things in place. And this is going to be kind of like the way that I'm going to present this plant. I'm actually going to get rid of this tool and use the base as if it was just the pot, or like a base for the pot. So let's go ahead and open up this tool in here, and let's find the cross mesh. I believe it's called, let's say, it's one of these ones. It's not the ring, it's not the screw, it's the support mesh, I think. So I'm going to select that one, and I'm going to hide it. I don't need to delete it. Let's select the pot again, bring it down. I'm going to try to hide those meshes, or those like little flicks of geometry inside this area. Like I said, you can totally use something like Blender or ZBrush, anything really to clean the geometry a little bit, but in an effort to save some time and just show you the entire process, I'm just gonna leave it like that. If I hold Shift and right click, I can rotate the light around, and I think that's looking pretty decent. And let's go ahead and add some material. So for the plant, if I select it, let's go to the mesh transform, this one right here. I can also right click and rename it. Let's call it plant. And let's go to the material here in the properties of that object. And here's where we can drop in that base color. So it's just an image really. And I'm gonna go ahead and drop that image into the base color. So let's drop it in there. And there we go. So now we have a nice base color for this object. Now, obviously, the material itself, so this could be like a concrete material, this is a plastic material, and of course the plant material would have different properties. So again, if you want to take this to the next level, you can just split this into parts and assign different materials. So let's say the leaves would have a little bit of translucency to make it more realistic. The plastic would be a bit shinier than the concrete and that sort of thing. But I think it just works well for the sake of this tutorial, which is basically showing you how quickly you can generate this type of things with Adobe 3D Sampler. And obviously with 3D Stager, you can present things quite nicely. Now for the chair or for this base, let's go ahead and find a material by clicking on this icon right here, and let's type wood. And let's just drop this oak wood in there. And now, once we drop the material, you would have it in here. Now, if you click on the sphere, on the actual material, and drop it to another leg, what you're going to create is another instance of that material. So I'm going to take the material itself, so from here, not from here, and just drop it into the leg so that I can sort of manipulate things like the UVs and the count of these veins in one single material and affect the rest. And I think that looks pretty decent. Actually, I mean, you can change things, you can be a little bit more thorough since the UVs are slightly crooked, but you can select the material. So let's select something like this, go to the material, and you can change the projection from UV to triplanar, like that. But I think the UV works fine. I mean, there are like little things that you can fix, but I think it works fine. Now, to complete the effect, let's go ahead and drop in some planes. So that's going to be just a plane for the ground. And let's drop another one, or actually you can just duplicate this one. So let's select the plane and click on duplicate here in the actions, and let's go ahead and rotate it. If you hold the shift key, you will be able to rotate it kind of like snap to integer numbers on 90 degrees, something like that. Perfect. So the last thing I want to do is create a camera by clicking on this button right here, and that creates that camera, and you see it's created here. You can get out of the camera by clicking on this button, out of the camera and back in, and I'm just going to frame it like so. And also maybe let's find some concrete to add to the wall. And also from this section right here, from the project materials, I'm going to drop it to the floor and then go to the repeat section here in the material, just to increase that repeat so that the size kind of like makes sense. All right, so the other thing we can do with the camera is selecting that camera and click on depth of field to enable it. And then you can increase the amount of blurriness. Now, you won't see anything right now because I've been showing you kind of like a preview of the render, but you can click on this ray tracing. If I click on that, it will give you a much nicer version of the render, or like the actual render, and then you can change all of that. So I'm gonna increase the blur amount, and this little cross here is basically this focus point. So if I click on set focus point, wherever I click next is gonna be the focal point. So I'm gonna click on the leaves right there, and in fact, let's go ahead and select the whole pod. I'm just going to rotate it. I'm going to try to find a nicer looking angle for it. All right, So something like that I think works well, and I can see a little bit of the holes on that old plastic, so that's kind of cool as well. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you can keep playing with this, and if you want, you can add some lights. If you click on the light icon here, let's delete that concrete. Let's get out of the camera by clicking on this dot in here, and let's drop a spotlight around here. And let's just change the color to something more dramatic, just so that you can see the effect, to red, and increase the exposure, maybe the intensity as well, and the cone angle, just to put it right on top of this plant. And let's go back into the camera by clicking on that little circle. And as you can see, it sort of like reacts to that color. Obviously, the color is not great. I think the default lighting works pretty well. But that's pretty much it. Everything is very, very simple, automated for you. There are obviously certain things that you can do to improve the look of the asset, to minimize the gaps between the geometry and clean it up a little bit. But if you think about it, for a process that takes just a few minutes, taking some photos from your, using a camera or your phone, if you go for a walk and take a few photos of an asset, then you can just go to your computer and turn it into something that could work quite nicely. So I'm going to leave this video here. Hopefully you have found this useful, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Cheers.